The room smelled of oak and expensive cigars as I stepped inside. My father's office always carried a heavy atmosphere, as if it didn't just hold books and contracts, but the weight of the entire Bennett legacy, a legacy I had never truly belonged to. Richard Bennett, my father, sat behind his massive blackwood desk, hands folded, eyes sharp. He always had that look whenever he was about to make a decision that would change someone's life, as though he were a judge handing down a final sentence. Beside him, my mother sat stiffly in her leather chair, her face composed, but her eyes filled with disappointment. And near the window, observing like a spectator at an execution, was my sister, Claire Bennett. She wore a perfectly tailored suit, her long brown hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. She was the pride of the Bennett family, Harvard graduate, rising corporate lawyer, and soon-to-be senior partner at my father's firm. I, Oliver Bennett, was nothing like them. I loved technology. I loved coding, hacking, the ethical kind, building things from scratch. I lived for innovation, for the rush of solving problems with nothing but logic and lines of code. And tonight, I knew they were about to strip away the last thing they still controlled, my inheritance. My father slid a folder across the polished desk. "I've made my decision," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The trust fund will go entirely to Claire. I will not continue investing in a son who refuses to take life seriously." I glanced down at the documents. The bolded title at the top stood out like a slap to the face. Trust Fund Reallocation. Amount: $5 million. Since birth, my parents had set aside equal funds for Claire and me, meant to be released when we turned 30. But there was a clause. If they believed one of us was unworthy, they had the power to transfer the entire amount to the other. And tonight, they had decided I wasn't worthy. I took a deep breath. "So it's come to this," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. My father raised an eyebrow. "So you understand?" I set the folder down and looked him straight in the eyes. "I understand that you never believed in me, that you never thought I could succeed unless I followed your path." His expression darkened. "Don't blame me for your own foolish choices. Claire chose the right path. And you? You waste your life sitting in some tiny apartment, staring at computer screens, playing with, what, apps? Do you have any idea how ridiculous you look to the world?" I met his gaze without flinching. "I look free." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Freedom doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't buy respect. It doesn't put you in the rooms where real power is decided." "I don't need those things," I said. "I just need to build something that matters." My mother, who had remained silent, let out a long sigh. "Oliver, if you would just come back and work for the firm, your father might reconsider. But as it stands—" She looked at Claire with a warm, approving smile. "Claire has earned this." I turned toward my sister. Claire didn't speak, but I saw the victory in her eyes. There was a time when we were close, when we were just two kids sharing ice cream after bad days at school, covering for each other when we got into trouble. But as we grew older, Claire chose to become the perfect daughter, the golden child. She chose to be exactly what our parents wanted. And I was the shadow, the disappointment, the stray thread in the perfect Bennett tapestry. I could have fought back. I could have told them about Sentinel AI, the financial technology startup I had built from scratch, about how I had just secured contracts with 3 major banks to test my fraud detection system, about how investors were already lining up to throw millions into my company. But I didn't, because I knew something they didn't. They thought stripping away this money would break me, that it would force me to come crawling back, begging for a place at their table. They had no idea I didn't need their money. I had already outgrown it. I stood up, closing the folder. "Claire, congratulations. Use the money well." Claire blinked, surprised that I wasn't reacting with anger. "Oliver, I raised a hand. "No need for speeches." I turned back to my father. "Enjoy this victory, Dad. Because it's the last time you'll ever think you've won against me. His brows knitted. What does that mean? I just smiled. You'll see. And with that, I walked out of the office, out of that mansion, out of their world. As I drove back to the apartment my father had mocked, I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger. I felt excited. Because now, the real game was about to begin. I didn't drive straight home after leaving my parents' man. Instead, I took a detour, heading downtown towards Sentinel AI's headquarters. A small but built IT with my own hands. As I stepped out of the elevator, the hum of activity filled the air. My team, brilliant engineers, data scientists, and cybersecurity experts, with this world ran on innovation and relentless problem-solving. Maya, my CTO, and oldest friend, Lou. I shrugged. 2. Claire gets $5 million. I get nothing. Maya skimmed through the paperwork and snorted. Damn. They really wrote you off, huh? They've been writing me off my whole life, I said. But it doesn't matter. We're about to make the Maya grinned. That's what I like to hear. You ready for the investor meeting tomorrow? I leaned against her desk, glancing at the data streams on her screen. Real-time transaction monitoring, fraud detection alerts, Sentinel A. I was already proving its worth. Then I made a decision. We're not taking their money, I said. Maya frowned. Wait, what? We don't need venture capital, I explained. Taking their investment means giving up control. We don't need their cash. We need their clients. Maya's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. You're thinking strategic partnerships instead. I nodded. If we integrate Sentinel directly with financial institutions, we don't just make money, we own the space. The banks will have to rely on us. And once that happens, Maya finished the thought for me. We make Bennett and Company irrelevant. I smiled. Exactly. The next morning, we walked into a conference room overlooking the Manhattan skyline, where representatives from 3 major banks waited for us. The tension in the room was thick. These weren't investors looking to throw money at a startup. These were powerful men and women who wanted results. Maya started the presentation, pulling up Sentinel AI's latest real-time results. In the last 24 hours, she began, Sentinel AI flagged 172 high-risk transactions as potential fraud. One of the banking executives leaned forward. And how many did our existing fraud detection systems catch? I took over. 15. Silence. Maya clicked to the next slide, showing a side-by-side analysis of how Sentinel AI outperformed traditional banking security measures. Here's the reality, I continued. Financial crime is evolving faster than your compliance teams can track. Your auditors, your risk analysts, they're looking for fraud after it's already happened. I tapped the screen, highlighting Sentinel AI's predictive modeling. We stop it before it starts. One of the executives, an older man with a silver beard and piercing blue eyes, studied the numbers carefully. He turned to his colleagues. This isn't just another fintech startup, he muttered. This changes the game. I didn't need to say anything else. By the end of the meeting, all 3 banks signed on to pilot Sentinel AI's fraud detection system. The first real blow to Bennett and Company came 3 weeks later. A high-profile bank, one of my father's biggest corporate clients, quietly ended its contract with his firm. No public announcement, no big scandal, just a simple decision made behind closed doors. They didn't need Bennett and Company's compliance services anymore, because Sentinel AI was now handling it better, faster, and at a fraction of the cost. At first, my father didn't notice. His firm had dozens of clients. Losing one bank wasn't a cause for concern. But then a second client left, then a third, then a fourth. Each time, it was the same. No explanations. Just a quiet, calculated shift away from my father's law firm, and toward us. One evening, I got a text from Claire. Claire. Something's going on at the firm. Clients are leaving. Dad is furious. Do you know anything about this? I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Me. No idea. Maybe they finally realized they don't need overpriced lawyers to do a machine's job. She left me on red. I smirked. 2 months after I was disinherited, my phone rang. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text. Dad, we need to talk. I didn't reply, because I knew exactly what was happening. By now, he had started connecting the dots. By now, he realized someone was moving against him. By now, he just didn't know that someone was me. I walked into the Sentinel AI office the next morning, feeling a new sense of momentum. The once small startup was now expanding rapidly. We were hiring more engineers, moving into bigger office space, and drawing attention from every major financial institution. Maya met me at my desk. You saw the text? I nodded. He's figured out something's wrong, but he doesn't know it's us yet. Maya smirked. So what's the next move? I picked up a new contract sitting on my desk. A merger offer from one of Bennett and Company's biggest competitors. I tossed it to Maya. We don't just take their clients, I said. We take the whole damn market. She grinned. Now we're talking. I picked up my phone and finally replied to my father's text. Me. Dinner? The Sterling Room. Tomorrow. 8 p.m. The same 5-star restaurant where 2 months ago he had celebrated cutting me off. Now he was about to walk into a meeting he wouldn't forget. And this time, I was the one calling the shots. The Sterling Room was exactly as I remembered it. Dim lighting, the soft hum of classical music, and the faint scent of aged whiskey lingering in the air. I arrived early, choosing a table near the center of the restaurant where everyone could see us. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a performance. I didn't have to wait long. At precisely 8 p.m., Richard Bennett walked in. He looked different. Still impeccably dressed, still carrying himself like a man in control. But there was something else, something almost imperceptible in the way he moved. A slight stiffness, a flicker of tension in his jaw. He was losing control. And he knew it. I stood as he approached, offering my hand with an easy smile. Dad? He hesitated for just a second before shaking it. His grip was still firm, but not as crushing as it used to be. We sat down. He didn't waste time. Oliver, I'll get straight to the point. Please do, I said, leaning back. He exhaled sharply. My firm is losing clients. I feigned surprise. That's unfortunate. He studied me carefully. Several banks have quietly ended their contracts with us over the past few months. These aren't small clients, Oliver. They're institutions we've represented for decades. I swirled the whiskey in my glass, waiting. And then there's Sentinel AI. He said it carefully, as if testing my reaction. I raised an eyebrow. What about it? He leaned forward. I know it's you. Silence stretched between us. Then I smiled. Took you long enough. His jaw tightened. So it's true, you've been orchestrating this, taking my clients. Wrong, I corrected. I didn't take anything. They left because Sentinel AI does a better job than your firm ever could. You built an empire on outdated systems, Dad. I built one that makes yours obsolete. He inhaled deeply, composing himself. What do you want? I chuckled. You think this is about money? He hesitated. Then what? I leaned in, my voice calm but firm. I want you to understand something, I said. You spent years telling me I was a failure, that I would never succeed because I didn't follow your path. You disowned me, wrote me off as nothing, and now the company you spent your life building is collapsing, not because I attacked you, but because you underestimated me. A flicker of something passed through his expression. Realization. For the first time in my life, I saw my father afraid. I let that moment linger before continuing. Bennett and Company is finished. You can either accept that or go down fighting a war you've already lost. He sat back, rubbing a hand over his face. He looked older now, weaker. Finally, he spoke. I can still fix this. I smirked. No, Dad, you can't. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A news alert. I turned it toward him so he could read it himself. Breaking news. Bennett and Company forced into merger amid client exodus. His face went pale. He snatched his own phone from his pocket, scanning the article. I watched as his hands clenched around the device. "They went public with it," he muttered. I took another sip of my drink. "Of course they did. Your clients abandoned you. Your partners lost confidence. You're no longer an asset. You're a liability." He looked up, his eyes burning with something between rage and desperation. "Who bought us out?" I smiled. "Whitmore and Stein." His breath hitched. "They were our biggest rivals." "Were," I corrected. "Now they own what's left of your firm." He stared at me, something breaking behind his eyes. "You did this." I shook my head. "No, Dad, you did this." For the first time in my life, Richard Bennett had nothing to say. The restaurant had grown quieter. People had started to notice us. My father, the great Richard Bennett, sitting across from me, defeated. He set his glass down and stood. "I hope you're satisfied," he said quietly. I looked up at him, my expression unreadable. "I am." He turned and walked away, his posture rigid. I watched him go, then leaned back in my chair, finishing my drink. It wasn't about revenge. It was about proving myself right. And I had. The fallout from the Bennett and Company collapse was swift and brutal. The day after our dinner at the Sterling Room, the news spread like wildfire. Bennett and Company merges with rival firm after losing major clients. Richard Bennett forced out. Power shift at one of the city's biggest law firms. Is corporate law dying? How fintech is disrupting traditional firms. Every headline, every financial blog, every industry insider was talking about it. My father had been erased. Claire called me the next morning. I let it ring. She called again in the afternoon. Again, I ignored it. Then came the text. "Claire. Pick up the damn phone, Oliver." I sighed, debating whether to leave her on read, but curiosity got the better of me. Called her back. She answered on the first ring. "You did this." Her voice was sharp, accusing. I leaned back in my chair, watching the city skyline from my new office. "Good morning to you too, Claire." "Don't give me that. You planned this. You went after Dad's firm." I chuckled. "I didn't go after anyone. Sentinel A, I provided a better solution, and the market responded. It's called competition." Claire let out a bitter laugh. "Competition? You didn't just compete, Oliver. You destroyed him." "He destroyed himself." Silence. She exhaled sharply. "I don't know whether to hate you or respect you." I smirked. "Why not both?" She didn't laugh. He's not taking this well. He won't talk to anyone. Won't even leave the house." A small part of me expected to feel something. Regret, pity, maybe even guilt. I felt nothing. "Claire," I said, my voice even. "Do you remember the night he disowned me? Do you remember the look on his face? How sure he was that I would fail?" She was quiet. "Now he knows how it feels," I finished. "You really don't care," she murmured. I didn't answer. A few weeks later, I got an email from Whitmore and Stein, the firm that had absorbed Bennett and Company. They wanted to sell the office building, the same Bennett and Company headquarters where my father had ruled for decades. The irony was delicious. I bought it in cash. On move-in day, I walked through the grand entrance, past the reception desk where my father's portrait had once hung. Now it was gone. I stopped at the front desk and made a call. The receptionist picked up. "Whitmore and Stein, how can I help you?" I smiled. "Put me through to Richard Bennett." A pause. Then, "I'm sorry, sir, but Mr. Bennett is no longer with the firm." I let that sink in before replying. "I know." A moment of silence. The receptionist was probably confused, but I wasn't calling for my father. I was calling for myself. "I just wanted to let someone there know," I said casually, watching my reflection in the polished glass windows, "that the new owner of the building says hello." Click. Months passed. Sentinel A, I continued to dominate. I barely thought about my father. Until one evening. I was leaving the building, my building, when I saw him, Richard Bennett. He was standing on the sidewalk, staring up at the office tower that had once been his kingdom. He looked smaller. His suit, once perfectly tailored, seemed a little loose. His hair, once immaculately styled, had started to gray at the edges. For the first time in my life, he looked old. We locked eyes. For a moment, I thought he might say something, but he didn't. He just looked away and walked off into the night. I watched him go. Then I turned and stepped into the elevator. I had work to do. The empire I built wasn't going to run itself.